There are at least 19 countries around the world, including France and Canada, where same-sex marriage is legal. But in countries like Uganda and Nigeria, being gay is itself illegal, punishable by prison terms, even life in prison. The United Nations Human Rights Council has issued a resolution reiterating its grave concern about violence and discrimination worldwide against homosexuals and transgender people. This year, the United States Supreme Court declined to hear appeals, allowing a significant expansion of same-sex marriage among individual states. The High Court also lifted a stay on issuing same-sex marriage licenses in Kansas, making it the 33rd state to allow gay unions. Joining us now from New York is Evan Wolfson. He's the founder and president of the Freedom to Marry organization. Evan, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
First, let's go through this UN Supreme Court decision. Well, it wasn't so much a decision as the justices just declining to hear appeals, right?
Technically, yes. What the Supreme Court did was leave standing several cases that had reached them out of the 40 or more decisions that have been percolating around the country, almost all in favor of the freedom to marry. But what the Supreme Court did by leaving these decisions intact was send a very strong signal to the other courts and the other states that it's time to follow what these courts and these states have done, which is to end marriage discrimination. And so as we have moved forward just in the last several days, we've gone from 19 states plus the District of Columbia, our nation's capital, the day of the Supreme Court ruling, to now gay people being able to marry in 30 states, representing about 60% of the American people, and we will soon have 35 states, representing about 2/3 of the American people living in a freedom to marry state. So tremendous progress and a real clear signal about where it's going.
So what kind of an impact would that have on same-sex couples in the United States?
Well, it means huge smiles, tremendous happiness, an ocean of joy all across the country as couples and their loved ones, their family, their friends, their community, their children are now able to celebrate the love and commitment that they have shown in life with the equal commitment under the law called marriage. And it means that these families are now able to participate in the safety net of protections and responsibilities that come with marriage. And it also means that the American people and people around the world are getting a chance to see with their own eyes. Families helped, no one hurt, nothing bad happening, but everybody just now a little better off.
Right, but we have 50 states in the United States, and as you just pointed out,
correct.
30 of those states can go ahead, you can have legal same-sex marriages there. The other 20 states, that's not happening right now.
15.
So how does that complicate the situation? Because what happens if a couple do get married in one state, then they decide they want to move for reasons of jobs or just want to move to another state where their marriage is not going to be recognized?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. That's why the job is not finished. Freedom to Marry's goal is to win marriage nationwide. The United States is one country with one constitution. All Americans, in fact, all people around the world, are entitled to human rights and respect and protection for their families. And for us to now have the freedom to marry effectively in 35 states, leaving 15 states unprotected and people unrespected, means that the job is not done. And so we are very much continuing to move forward in the courts and in the legislatures and in the public debate to make sure that we remove all pieces of discrimination from the law so that all families can be respected as they live, travel, or work throughout the country.
So there's still a pretty long hill to climb, because presumably you would have to do this state by state.
Well, no, the way the United States works is marriage licenses are issued by the individual states. So the discrimination happens at the level of each state. But of course, the states are subject to the United States Constitution, which guarantees the freedom to marry and equal protection under the law. And so what the courts now are saying is state barriers against discrimination violate that national constitutional command of equality for all and of the freedom to marry for all. And that's why what we're seeing now is waves of states ending their discrimination as the courts that govern those particular groups of states are weighing in. And we have a few more to go that will help bring down the discrimination, or at some point, the United States Supreme Court might step in again, and this time bring the entire country to national resolution. We're not going to have to go state by state by state within the four corners of each of every one of the states, and we're now focused on the 15 states and bringing the freedom to marry to them as well.
Right, and how likely is it that the U.S. Supreme Court could get involved in this again and take a decision on one of those 40 cases that you said are still out there?
Well, there are now, of these 40-some cases that are still making their way through the courts, they're going to be reaching, several of them have already reached, the appellate courts. We've won in almost all the trial courts, the lower courts. They are now reaching the appellate courts, and they basically now fall into 4 circuit or federal appellate courts that cover these 15 states. Each of those courts will rule in the next several weeks or months to come, and hopefully they will rule in favor of the freedom to marry, just as all the other federal appellate courts have so far, recently affirmed by the Supreme Court. But if they don't, if one of the courts goes the wrong way and gets it wrong, I'm pretty confident that the Supreme Court then would step in and finish the job.
Evan, if you just look at the events of the past few days, how far has the movement for gay rights come in this country?
Oh, the movement for full and equal rights and participation and inclusion for gay people has come an enormous distance in a historical short period of time, although in fact this struggle, of course, has been going on for decades, and the progress we're seeing right now builds on decades and decades of work and suffering and combating and conversation and persuasion. But to win the freedom to marry now for 2/3 of the American people, up from 0 little more than a decade ago, is a tremendous historical transformation that really shows the power of the truth. When the American people got a chance to really talk it through, not be shut down by prejudice or stereotypes or fear, but to actually hear the stories of real gay couples, their neighbors, their family members, their friends, and to think about values of freedom and equality and respect and honoring love and commitment and treating others as you would want to be treated. As the American people have had a chance to think and talk that through, hearts have changed and hearts have and minds have opened. And the courts now are really following the journey that the American people have made from 27% support for the freedom to marry when I was doing the world's first ever trial back in the 1990s on the freedom to marry, to now 59%, a clear near supermajority. And the courts are following that public understanding, that greater clarity about the truth and the fairness that's at stake here.
Right, and support, or I should say relative support, has come from the most unlikely quarters. I mean, we've just had no less than the Pope Francis, who says that the Catholic Church must show more tolerance towards gay people. You must be encouraged by that kind of sentiment.
I certainly am encouraged by the new tone and many of the points that the Pope has made about treating others as you'd want to be treated, respecting one another, not judging one another, working to assure the happiness and decent life for everybody in this precious time on the planet. But I also have to point out that in some ways the Pope is catching up with where at least the majority of American Catholics are. 62% of American Catholics support the freedom to marry, even though some of the bishops and some of the hierarchy have gone in the other direction. The people, American Catholics, have really, again, had a chance to think it through, look at their neighbors, look at their own family members, and rise to the command to treat your neighbor as you would want to be treated.
Right, so on the one hand we have all these encouraging developments, yet there are disturbing developments that we still see. For instance, we have a lot of teenagers who are committing suicide because they bullied for being gay. So I guess attitudes still have to change to a large extent in many parts of the country.
Absolutely. Look, changing the law is a necessary first step. We want to put the law, we want to put the government on the side of fairness, on the side of people. But it's not enough to have the law on your side. We also want to make sure that everybody's lived experience is one of respect and inclusion and opportunity and freedom. And that's work that continues whether you are fighting to tear down barriers of racial discrimination or discrimination against women or discrimination against gay people. It's important, it's necessary to put the law and the government on the side of justice, but it's also about how we treat one another in our day-to-day lives. And of course, it's not only about the United States. This is about human rights for all people. This is about everybody's desire for love and commitment and dignity and family and freedom throughout the globe. And really, we need to see progress along these lines throughout the world, including in many of the places where, instead of moving in the right direction, societies are turning on the most vulnerable with oppressive and brutal laws that violate human rights and that are an assault to values of human decency.
Evan Wolfson, thanks for joining us.